he's put on
So
screen.
this does have to be with the movie.
Yes.
I wasn't totally sure, but I said let me at least check it out.
Yeah.
If it's not what I think it is, I can always walk out.
Right.
You know, not to offend anyone.
Yeah.
Start the presentation.
What have you seen any other? Has anybody seen any other Makoto Shinkai works? Yeah, that's probably his biggest, most Japanese thing.
I've heard of it. I don't think I've seen that one. What else has he done? I mean, you know, sometimes you watch something and you don't know who's behind it.
Yeah.
We'll start the panel. We'll give an introduction to Shinkai.
Yeah.
I'll just start it now, though. Welcome to the Garden of Words and Lessons. This is my name is Justin Cole, and this is Alan DeColo Souza. So, about myself a little bit. I've been an anime fan since I was like 5 years old. Like ever since I watched Power Rangers. I mean, that sort of led into anime. It led into Pokemon and Dragon Ball Z and all that stuff. And about I want to say 4 years ago or 5 years ago maybe, I watched 5 centimeters per second for the first time, and I fell in love with Shinkai's entire style and everything he was trying to convey through his movies. And within the last few years, especially with the release of The Garden of Words and me having gone and watched almost everything he's ever made, I really wanted to do I did a panel last year on Shinkai in general, but that I felt was too broad to appeal to a lot of people. So I just decided to do a panel focused on one of his works, and I will hopefully be doing a panel on 5 centimeters per second sometime in the future. Maybe a bit different structure than this. I'm not entirely sure yet. Would you like to introduce yourself?
I'm Alan. I think I fell in love with Makoto Shinkai before I saw a Makoto Shinkai film. I had always been looking for. I realized when I watched his works that it was what I had always been looking for in a director, and had not found anywhere else. So when I saw it, I'm like, he's here.
So we chose The Garden of Words because it's his second most popular movie. I believe 5 centimeters per second is just a little bit more popular, even though in 2014 there was a gigantic boon of Garden of Words fans in America, and he also came over and promoted it from Otakon and all that stuff. And it has a lot of lessons and a lot of themes packed into a very short amount of time that makes it very easy to talk about in general. This panel, for example, is going to try to be 50 minutes to an hour long, and the movie is 46 minutes long. So you can talk about it for longer than the length of the actual film.
I didn't realize it was that short. Sometimes you watch stuff and it's so enjoyable.
Yeah.
Time flies no matter what.
Yeah, and the good thing about this is most of Shinkai's movies can be talked about at some length, at least with an hour length, which is why I want to do one on 5 centimeters per second itself. But yeah, so I think what we'll be doing, the way we'll be structuring this is we're going to look at one or two elements of that Shinkai kind of spreads throughout all of his movies, and then we'll go into a deeper focus on the movie itself and the characters. The characters make up a gigantic portion of this movie. They make up almost the entire thing. So what we'll be doing is looking at their relationship, and as they learn in their relationship, we'll try to transfer it to how the viewers are supposed to learn, or what the viewers are supposed to learn as these characters also learn, and what Shinkai is trying to teach the viewers as well as the characters. So the first slide is going to be, first two slides are just introductions to the characters. So those of you who have seen the movie, you know who these two are. For those of you who haven't, this is an introduction. Takao Akizuki is a high school student who is very driven, very passionate about his goal of becoming a shoe cobbler, which is a bit of a strange profession. It's one Makoto Shinkai wanted to use on purpose. He knows how much money he needs to achieve his goals. He wants to go to a school where he can learn how to cobble, but that'll cost him however many thousands of dollars. So he works constantly, like with almost no free time, to make that goal a reality. He is disenchanted with school. We barely ever see him in a school setting because he hates that he has to even go to school. He doesn't want to go to school, but other than the somewhat selfish act of not wanting to go to school, he is a very mature character, and he's very you can see that he has a goal in mind, he's focused, he's driven, he knows what he wants in life. And then we have Yukino Yukari, who is the teacher who is at her wit's end pretty much at the beginning of the film. And throughout the film, kind of, you see her go back and forth from being stable to becoming more unstable. She is a literature teacher. She really likes classic literature. She really wants to be able to teach other students about classic literature, or teach students about classic literature. But the problem here with her is that she has reached an impasse where she goes to school, some drama might happen, some bad things might happen, she might get harassed, so she can't capitalize on her passion because the students don't want anything to do with her, and she doesn't know what to do. She doesn't know if she should transfer school, she doesn't know if she should stop teaching, she doesn't know if she should look for another profession. She's extremely lost, and that's a lot of the reason she ends up going to the gazebo, or in the first place, and during the rainy days, and also during the sunny days, we see sometimes that she goes when it's sunny outside. And she likes to read, as we see her do so often. So the first thing I wanted to comment is the common element about trains. Throughout all of Shinkai's works, he likes to employ trains time and time again. Trains are in almost everything he's done, not necessarily because he likes them, just because he likes what they represent. Trains in most of his works imply separation. In 5 centimeters per second, the characters step on trains and they become separated from one another. When two characters step on two different trains, it's implying that they're moving away from each other, because that's what trains do. They take you to different places, and if you're not on the same train, you're not going to the same place. And what the trains also represent here, as opposed to just different places, these trains are taking these characters to separate worlds of existence, kind of. The student world where Takeo exists, and the adult world of business and jobs and all the adult things that Yukari represents. And these two worlds aren't really supposed to interact or mesh as like friends, or they're not supposed to have they're supposed to have a strict relationship as a student and a teacher. And the train kind of helps them facilitate that separation of like one's a student, one's a teacher. And when they leave the train, when Takeo leaves the train, he veers off course from the journey to his student life, and he goes to the gazebo, which is another world, quote unquote.
I'd like to also mention on the trains that this is if you had to establish a running theme for directors, what is their major kind of life's work when a theme you see running through all of their films? For Makoto Shinkai, it would be distance, both physical and emotional distance. And he tends to represent things twofold, one in the literal and two in kind of a secondary metaphorical sense. So in some of his films, it can be people literally galaxies apart, but a representation he constantly uses to show the emotional distance between two characters is by using trains. And using trains as a way to close that emotional distance, and in this case, bringing them to Tokyo Gyoen Botanical Garden, or Botanical Park, where they meet in the gazebo on rainy days.
So the question was asked, I wanted to get to what else has Makoto Shinkai done? He's done 5 centimeters per second. He's done Children Who Chase Lost Voices from Deep Below. He's done this film. He's done The Place Promised in Our Early Days. He's done Voices of a Distant Star. And he has done numerous shorts and numerous commercials that are very entertaining to watch, if only to just see the animation he used back when he was an aspiring animator and director, and when he does commercials for construction companies for whatever reason.
His production company, Comics Wave, does.
Yeah.
He's made me tear up in a 30-second commercial about, I believe, a train line. He knows how to bring a lot of elements together to create a very impactful image.
So anyway, back on to the Garden Words. The next slide is the main ideas that we wanted to talk about. This presentation is kind of divided into 4 sections with some extra screenshots and pictures tacked on at the end. the main ideas are rain, walking, aging, or shoes and feet, they all kind of tie together. Aging, maturity, and we have loneliness as well. Loneliness being kind of the, not least important, but one of the least prevalent issues here. And the first one of the, probably the most prevalent and possibly the most important is rain. And it rains everywhere, water's everywhere in this film. Rain is in movies, rain represents obviously darkness or depression. Rain represents foreshadowing for something about to go wrong, for something bad about to happen. But it also represents a cleansing. The rain, when you walk outside, when some characters walk out into the rain, it feels like they're being cleansed of sins. It feels like they're taking the next step in their characterization to become reborn as a new person. And the Garden of Words definitely echoes this. In most movies, though, what I've seen is that rain generally is associated with a bad thing. And when you think rain, you think no sun, and no sun means no happiness, and no happiness means depression, which this movie grapples with a little bit in a different way, but it uses rain as a simple extreme happiness as opposed to extreme sadness or anything bad about to happen in the movie. So in the Garden of Words, it's longing and hope. It's the two characters constantly are saying over and over and over again, they hope that it rains, they hope they can go see each other. The rain is it's their only excuse, quote unquote, to go see each other, because it creates this third world that I talked about where they can meet up and they can speak as equals and they don't even have to know each other's name to enjoy each other's company. And the rain gives them the ability to escape from their daily routines, which they both seem to despise so much, or they're both so confused about, and it gives them the ability to just be comforted for at least a day or at least a few hours. And the rain also represents happiness. And when you think in movies, usually the sun shining means happiness, but during the dry season, when the rain stops in the movie, you can feel the characters, you can feel them both kind of growing colder and growing more confused and becoming less stable, and you feel like the sunshine is just kind of bringing on this depressive state as opposed to what it normally does. And Shinkai does that with quite a few themes, with a few common themes we'll get to. And he really likes to turn those things on the head, kind of. He does that several times within this movie. And the rain, in this instance, all these things are represented, and they're pretty much just for these two characters. You can assume that every other character in the film probably still has their own opinion of rain. They probably aren't necessarily too happy when it rains outside, but for these two characters, the rain represents something extremely gratifying and extremely happy to both of them.
Yukino comments at one point when going to Tokyo Gyoen Botanical Park during a sunny day that feels like a completely different place, and there's another happy couple that's kind of like also in the gazebo where she's sitting alone, and it's kind of intruding into the space that she had. So the rain creates a separate world for them, veiled by water.
So we also have rain used as an emotion in this movie. Specifically, when the rain is very intense. At first, it's raining and it's the wet season and the rain's coming down all the time, and these characters are just getting to know each other. So the rain isn't as intense as it could be. And when we get later on to the film, the last few scenes, the rain is comes pounding down on both of them to reflect that they are both, at least Takao's and probably Yukino's, their emotions are kind of overflowing, and the intensity is just coming down on both of them, and they can both feel it and they both see it. And it's very clearly represented in the garden scene and the stairway scene, which both their emotions kind of come bubbling out of the top when they have that final confrontation at the very end. We also have umbrellas that usually block out the rain, and with this, blocking out the rain isn't necessarily a good thing. Blocking out the rain with the umbrellas here, I watched the director's commentary. I went back about a month ago and I rewatched this movie 2 or 3 times in a row to see it, to give myself a rewatch to look at it vanilla, and then I watched it with Shinkai's commentary, and he specifically said that the umbrellas were used to symbolize personal space. And I wanted to preface that because I know all of the times with some of these analyses it can seem like, you're just pulling stuff from nowhere, but no, this is from Shinkai himself. The umbrellas, when the umbrella was open, the characters were kind of being guarded. They weren't being completely honest. They were keeping secrets from one another. And when the umbrellas were closed, they were being much more honest with each other. And because the umbrella kind of represents personal space, and in Japan, standing under someone's umbrella has much more importance and significance than it does in America. And the last thing is the only time the rain breaks and we see the sun shining on Yukino's face is during the stairway scene. She runs down the stairs and the sun breaks on her face when she starts crying because she's finally had the realization that what she's been doing the wrong thing this entire time. She needs to start walking on her own feet. All of her characterization comes back and hits her with just a giant ray of sunshine, which kind of reconstructs the idea that the sun is a good thing because it's finally illuminating her and it's illuminating all of her positive aspects now, as opposed to any of her negative ones. So on to the next slide, we have the other worlds idea we keep reiterating. The two separate worlds existed as a student and a teacher, and Takao kind of reinforces this idea itself. When he talks about his obsession with adults, he keeps obsessing that they exist in a different world, or they're so mysterious. It's like he feels separated from the adult world, which I don't know if he should or not, but he definitely feels there's a degree of separation as a 15-year-old, and he gives more credence to the idea that there was these two separate worlds. But the gazebo and the rain create this third world that wasn't supposed to exist. These characters, if they had gone to school when they were supposed to, at some point Takao would have realized that Yukino is a teacher, and they would have never had this relationship. Because in America and in Japan and mostly everywhere else, you don't have a semi-romantic relationship with your teacher ever, because that's extremely taboo, and for multiple different reasons. So this third world kind of let them develop that relationship as almost as like a backlash against the other two worlds that they didn't want to go to or visit ever. And then we have the omnipresence of rains. The fact that the rain and water and steam and just everywhere in the movie. The water at the lake is always near them. The rain is always falling down when they interact. One of the only times it's not raining when they interact is when they're at the lake at the end, but right before the downpour starts. Even when they're in Yukino's room, there's steam coming off of the food that they're making, surrounding them. There's rain outside. The one other time I can think of when they interact and it's not raining is when Yukino comes to school, but that is a passing glance and they don't even say anything to each other. So they're not really interacting. They're falling back into the student-teacher dynamic that they have when they're at school and not when they're at the gazebo. And they don't really, without the water there, they don't really interact. If the water's not there, their relationship isn't there. The water needs to be there for their relationship to be there. That idea is kind of shown time and time again whenever it's raining, and because of things like the dry season. When the dry season comes, they just stop seeing each other for weeks, and it really festers inside of them that they're not being able to see each other. So now we have the Manyoshu, which also makes a direct reference to rain itself. Here's the verse Yukino provided at the beginning and the response that Takao gave her near the end of the film. It's pretty telling, the whole thing about the Manyoshu, that it specifically says, even if rain comes or not, I will stay here together with you. So that, the whole thing I was talking about was they only interacted when there was water there. They only felt comfortable interacting when there was water there. The thing they needed to do to kind of move past that, they needed to be comfortable with seeing each other when it wasn't raining and when they didn't have an excuse to go see each other. They needed to be able to talk to each other normally without any conveniency there. They needed to be able to talk whether it was sunny or raining.
So a bit about the kind of poetic ritual and its impact in Japanese culture. This is what's called a tanka, a short form poem from the Manyoshu, a chronicle of 1,000 Leaves, which is a compilation of tanka and other Japanese poems from like the years 800 before, 800 and before that. So we don't even know the names of the authors for a lot of these, but it's frequently studied, and throughout the poetic culture coming up to the modern day, it's been used in almost a game-like manner, where people will compose the first half of a tanka and somebody else will compose a second half to go with it. But another common thing is to say the first half of a tanka from the Manyoshu or some other well-known work, and somebody else will have to guess what the second part of that is, the correct answer to it. So Yukino Yukari is actually a Japanese literature teacher, and this was unknown to Takao for a long time. So on their very first meeting, she's looking up at the rain and looking at him in the gazebo, and just thinking to herself, she says, I think it might be appropriate. And she says the first half of this tanka, and Takao is just kind of confused for quite a while because he hasn't been through his literature courses yet because he's only 15. So part of learning kind of the mysteries of adulthood was when he finally happened to come across it during his school classes, where he just came across it in a book.
And this is the first instance of Yukino making a mistake and leading Takao on. She constantly leads him on throughout the film. She never gives him an outright direct answer. Even when he confesses to her, she doesn't outright say no. She just tells him, I'm your teacher. So she's always leading him on because she's not all there in the head sometimes. She's pretty depressed at certain points of the film. This especially with this response verse, talking about them staying together, that's like a big deal. So she knew she was leading him on. And so I do have this section on the Manyoshu as well. Adding on to what Alan said, Shinkai was also a literature student in college. He graduated with a degree in classical literature, and he really wanted to use the Manyoshu in a movie. He wanted this is kind of an amalgamation movie of him taking things he wanted to use and then just combining them all in like this huge pot. And it's presented as a riddle, and it's used as like kind of a push to get Takao to go back to school, because Yukino teaches at that school, so she knows the response verse to that to the Manyoshu is in school, and so she's kind of subtly hinting at him that he should probably go to school to study that because she knows it's there. And so, as I said with the response verse, it gives more credence to the fact that they both needed to learn if they wanted to actually have a relationship, they both would have needed to actually be with each other all the time and not just when it's raining. It's not circumstantial. A relationship is built on being able to be together as often as you can and not just having conveniences or excuses for it. And the rain was the thing bringing them together in the first place. So the last thing about rain I wanted to cover is the song by Motohiro Hata that's used at the end of the film with a final kind of AMV-like of a bunch of different scenes used in the film. And Shinkai also, this is another thing, he wanted to use rain by this song, but he listened to it a lot in college and it was sung by an older artist, and he wanted specifically to use a newer artist to possibly appeal to the age range or the target demographic of this film specifically. And in my opinion, he really nailed it with the song, as he so usually does in his, as he did in 5 centimeters per second as well. And you can draw some parallels from the lyrics to the story with the male singer saying, "Don't go, don't go." This comes right after Yukino says, "Well, I'm leaving. I'm going to teach in a school district way far away." And the other verse is him is the singer saying, well, as long, even if it's raining, even if it's pouring, I don't care as long as you're next to me. So nothing will get him down, even if as long as she's there next to him. And the singer in the song does a really good job of paralleling Takao as a character himself. And I believe that's it for rain. So now we're going to move on to walking shoes and feet. All those things kind of balled up into one category. They all have, I wouldn't split them into three because I would just be reiterating a lot of points. So yeah, this is some of you may know or have heard it called, this is kind of a foot fetish movie. There's a lot of scenes of feet, a lot of very detailed and very beautiful scenes of feet, done very, very purposefully. There is the heavy emphasis on Yukino's feet on purpose because while she can physically walk, she can't metaphorically walk, and the easiest way to show that visually is to show her feet and to show the fact that she needs, that Takao's a cobbler and he's quote unquote helping her walk by giving her a pair of shoes. And Shinkai says in the commentary as well that it's used as an intimate moment between them when he is taking measurements of her feet. Now, strangely enough, this kind of made me think of the first few minutes of Pulp Fiction when they talk about giving foot massages, because one of the characters thinks, well, it's not personal, and the other one's like, no, it's totally personal. Every single foot massage you give is personal. So, at least from what I can tell in Japan, touching someone's feet in such a manner like that is very, very intimate. Like, you're pretty much inside their space at that point. You're touching something, you're touching a naked part of their body on their feet. And Shinkai used this, and he designed it to be sexy on purpose, not to give into fan service, but to imply, like, not that they were having sex, but that they were just more intimate than normal friends would be, but then definitely more intimate than a student and a teacher would be. And the whole focus on the feet really meshes well with the whole walking thing. And so for Takao and walking on his own, we have Takao not needing to necessarily learn how to walk forward. He's always moving forward in the film, even during the dry season when Yukino is kind of stumbling. He's just pressing on. He's doing schoolwork. He's doing working all the time just to get to the money to achieve his dreams and achieve his goals, even if he doesn't have his family to fall back on. The one thing I wanted to mention that I don't believe I put in here is his family is not really a source of support for him so much. His brother is there as support, but traditionally in anime and traditionally in Japan, you get family as a sense, like you can always fall back on your family. And a lot of my favorite shows and a lot of my favorite films subvert this by either having the family not be, or break apart, or having the family not be supportive of the characters at all. And Takeo's mother might be supportive of him, but she's never really around. And his brother has his own life. He can't just baby Takao all the time. So Takao needs to learn, he learns successfully how to walk on his own. But the only problem with him is that his childish belief that adults are somehow like these different creatures almost, and that he wants to get to the world of adults as soon as he can. He doesn't want to be in school. He just wants to blow past all that, and he doesn't seem to want to put in the effort to go to school even.
Okay, so this is something that on another viewing of the film I kind of had to touch on, but it can be easily confused, and this actually interplays a lot with the idea of whether or not The Garden of Words is actually a romance film or not. Makoto Shinkai was focusing on a more antiquated concept of Japanese love, as opposed kind of to the Western, more romantic sort of love. It translated out, it actually translates as lonely sadness. So it could almost be that it's not a romantic relationship between Takao and Yukino, but an intimate companionship, a relying upon, but not necessarily romance. This comes up and displays a lot As Justin said, it comes from the fact that Takao comes from a broken family. His father is gone. We're not sure if he's died or if the parents divorced, but you don't hear anything. You only see the back of his father in a flashback. At the beginning of the film, Takao's mother actually leaves the house to go live with her boyfriend, and you don't see her again until the very end of the movie when she comes back. And there also happen to be a number of similarities between Yukino and Takao's mother that you can infer. When Takao first hears the tanka, he doesn't know the answer to it, and he's confused. He asks his brother. His brother's like, I don't really know. Mom might know. He's like, yeah, but she's gone. When Takao asks Yukino about her diet of beer and chocolate, he mentions that his mother is the drinker in the family, which is another kind of overlap. So it could be that Yukino is kind of representative of the mother, but she's definitely a representative of adulthood. And that is a mysterious thing to him. And he kind of goes through some of the similar things that you actually see in a later flashback, that his father gave his mother shoes. And that was what initiated his idea to become a cobbler in the first place. And then Takao goes through the same process with Yukino. It could be that he feels that his mother is also in a similar position as Yukino, because she's also kind of lost and bouncing around and has similar fragileness to her. And you can gather this all from the short period she actually spends on screen. So in this broken house, even once the mother leaves, it's just Takao and his brother for a while. And his brother was constantly having, like in the few times you see his mother, trying to calm her down and manage his mother. So he almost fell into the role of father. But he later, he has a girlfriend. He's going to be kind of starting his own household. So he moves out to live with his girlfriend, and Takao is left alone. Takao is a very responsible 15-year-old, so he can manage that all pretty well on his own. But it shows that he doesn't really have anybody in his family to support him when he's there. So he is very isolated there. He does go over to his brother's for dinner once in a while. And his brother, also using the shoes and walking metaphor, can kind of recognize that Takao is kind of being stretched by the way he's living, but that him just kind of handing something to him won't be accepted well and won't really help him either way. So it's something he has to figure out on his own. And he mentions that in the metaphor of he's walking around in these poor quality moccasins that he made himself and trying to get it all done. So an alternative to kind of the more traditional Oedipal structure that you could consider is that this is actually kind of and this is a definite theme of the movie, but whether or not the mother is specifically playing to the idea that adulthood is kind of illusory, and Takao's been romanticizing it all this time. He at one point, when he says that Yukino represents no less than the secrets of the world to him, because she's kind of mysterious and older, and starts off with a mysterious riddle. But he later finds out how Yukino actually is, and that she's struggling to make it where she is, probably more than he is, and that his mother's in a similar position, and that these adults, just because they're older, don't necessarily have their emotional state together as much as somebody younger might.
So the whole thing now with Yukino is that she's learning how to walk. She cannot walk on her own. Sure.
Can you go back one slide, if possible? Is that a typo? At the end, he realizes he must go farther to walk on
Oh, farther, yes, I'm sorry.
Oh yeah.
Talk about a Freudian
Yeah,
slip.
yeah.
Yeah. Good catch.
Maybe I have a complex of my own.
That's an electric complex.
Yeah.
So yeah, as Alan was saying, Yukino is an adult, but she's still lost. She feels like she hasn't moved forward since she was 15. It's a 12-year difference. She feels like she hasn't gone anywhere, even though she's obviously gotten through school. She's had a job for a little bit. She seems to be able to support herself well. She can buy herself nice clothes. She can buy nice things for Takao, but she still feels like she hasn't moved forward at all, and she doesn't have any idea where she wants to go. So she cannot move forward. She's making no progress. Where Takeo is making rough progress, Yukino is making no progress. And Takao has to kind of remind her what she needs to do to learn how to walk. And he teaches her that she needs to do it by herself. She can't always be relying on other people. It's okay to rely on them from time to time, because if she didn't rely on Takao, she wouldn't have ever learned how to walk anyway. And he also makes her the shoes to reinforce the idea that he's helping her learn how to walk. So, Takao the cobbler is obviously an old, outdated profession. It'll surprise any viewer watching the film that this 15-year-old kid is trying to become a cobbler by hand. Not with any machines, just with wood and leather and all these materials that he needs to acquire on his own. This is also one of the things, I believe I mentioned it earlier, that Shinkai wanted to incorporate in this film, because he felt like it would give his character some more personality. The biggest criticism against Shinkai's films is that his characters don't have any personality. So with this, it was just a slight move for Shinkai to give Takao that kind of personality he couldn't give his other characters. And having a hobby instantly makes a character, at least, if not more relatable, then more understandable. And the thing about Takao and his hobby is he gets extremely defensive before anybody even calls him out on it. It's implied that adults have made fun of him in the past, or that he's imagined that adults have made fun of him. Towards the end, he tells Yukino, he's like, come on, tell me it's stupid, tell me I'll never amount to anything, tell me it's a worthless dream. And he doesn't want to actually hear that. He just wants to hate Yukino because of what happened at the end. But he really, really is passionate about this, and this is the only thing he seems to be able to want in life. And it lends itself to the story as well, because when you won't do very well if you're trying to walk outside barefoot, and kind of parallels the story that you need some kind of metaphorical shoes and you want to learn how to walk through life at all. And I think that was incorporated pretty successfully with themes of rain and everything. Sure.
This is also sounding a lot like the character, the male lead in Whisper of the Heart. Because, again, an antiquated hobby, violin making by hand, and he is willing to put his entire career future on the line in order to go to Cremona instead of going to a Japanese high school. I think that there's a little...
yes, Makoto Shinkai picked it for similar reasons. He wanted to have Takao have some sort of an artistic trait, but one that was very difficult. Not like, say, an expressive modern art where whatever you do is right, but something where you have to train and study, and there's a little bit of mechanical aspect to it, but is also somewhat antiquated. And the character is probably going through, those characters probably share a lot of the same internal struggles from Whisper of the Heart. Both that character and the main female protagonist in Whisper of the Heart were trying to kind of grow into adulthood and get into their jobs of being a violin maker and an art writer.
Of course, they were like both 13 or 14, and
Yeah.
that's when that's supposed to happen. But in this movie...
yeah, he's jumped at it much sooner than all of his other peers.
Well, the woman, Yukino, has let it go by.
Yeah, she kind of started in, and then she's not sure if she's in the place that she is supposed to be. She's not sure if she's actually cut out for it, and she thinks about quitting teaching entirely.
Okay, so we do have about 15 minutes left. I'll try and get through this, and if there's time at the end, we can do more questions. This has gone better than I thought it would, thankfully.
Yeah.
So now we have the ending scenes where Yukino is moving away, and she's not doing this to hurt Takao, she's not doing this to hurt herself, she's doing it to help herself. She mentions in Takao, she's like, I found my passion back in my hometown, or back where I learned how to become a teacher. So she's moving back there to try and rekindle that passion, and that involves moving away from the city, moving away from Takao, moving away from her sole source of support. At one point, you do see her call her ex-boyfriend as well, or is assumed to be her ex-boyfriend, who either has a wife or another girlfriend, and he helps her himself. He's like, well, here's all the information you need about whatever, and at this point, Yukino learns that she can't always be relying on other people. She has to move forward by herself. She can't be just pushed along and ground along by other people. She has to do it for herself.
That scene on the phone with her ex-boyfriend near the beginning actually has a beautiful piece of, I don't know if I'm saying it correctly, mise-en-scène, where she's talking about her emotional fragility at the time, and there's a shot of her touching her feet at the same time she's saying that, to kind of represent how poor at walking through life she is, that she needs to rely on her ex-boyfriend, who's already with another woman, to kind of still help her get through the trouble she's having.
So one of my favorite scenes in the movie is when she runs out after him. Mm-hmm. And the thing I noticed on a rewatch of this movie is that with the whole thing about shoes and with the whole thing about walking, she runs after him barefoot. She doesn't put on any shoes. She learns that she needs to be able to do this by herself, and it's a metaphor for her. When she trips and falls, it shows that she's tripped and fell in real life. But in this case, instead of just laying there, she gets up and keeps running, because that's what you need to do. When you trip and fall, you need to get up and keep moving forward, or else life will swallow you whole.
So this ending actually is something that I've been looking for a type of ending like this in movies for quite a long time. But movies tend to wrap things up much more perfectly in a bow than, but Makoto Shinkai didn't quite do that. There was a lot of metaphor in there with her not having the Takao's shoes on, because shoes are kind of a representation of somebody else helping and supporting you. And that's how they've been getting through both of them had been getting through their lives up to this point, was a little bit of support from each other and companionship. And again, playing into this kind of Japanese idea of whether or not this is actually romance, is that whether or not Takao has mistaken this kind of close companionship and misinterpreted himself as being in love, which Yukino might have been aware of. So you're not entirely sure exactly what that meant, but you do know that they're connected. And after they are separated from each other, their experiences with each other have caused them both to grow, and the manga goes into create some other scenes at the end, but you're not sure that they're ever actually going to meet again. They seem like they might, but you're not sure that they'll ever see each other again. But you do know that both of those characters have been impacted by the rainy seasons they spent together in the park, and that's affected who they are as people going forward. So that relationship meant something, whether or not they actually see each other again or not.
So yeah, we have the post credits in the manga, which Alan just covered pretty much. He delivers the shoes to the park when it's snowing outside, as we know, snow is a form of rain, and but she's not there. She's moved on from the gazebo in that world, but he still goes there to give her the shoes anyway because he doesn't have any other way of contacting her. So she hints at relying on Takao again with the letter that she gives, or letter that she leaves him, she's like, I might be relying on you again in the spring, which can be interpreted any number of different ways. So one of the last ones, the third one we're going to talk about is age versus maturity. And age versus maturity in the movies usually is the older you are, the more mature you are. And the older you are, the wiser you are. There's a reason it's called the wise old man archetype and not like the wise young man. The age implies wisdom, and the young are supposed to learn from the old. And then we have the student and teacher. And in a lot of inspirational movies, you know, the teacher helps some defeated student get back on their feet and, you know, move forward and all that stuff. And the Garden of Words, we have the complete opposite of that. We have Takao being the teacher and Yukino being the student, even though their professions, quote unquote, are pretty much the opposite of that. And Shinkai tries to teach his viewers that age doesn't mean maturity. Him and Hana Kanazawa, the voice of Yukino, both say in the interviews, they're like, we're still children at 27 years old. Just because you're 27 doesn't mean you're mature. Just because you're 15 doesn't mean you're immature. Age doesn't imply maturity, even though it is, some people believe it is the biggest factor or the only factor. So we have the determined student, Takao. He has a lot of qualities that are not really shown to be common of those students his age. He has a profession in mind. He knows what he wants to do with the rest of his life. He knows how to work to make that happen. And a lot of college students, even if you ask college students what they want to do for the rest of their life, they're like, I don't know. I'll figure that out like whenever. Even some postgraduates, some students who graduated don't know what they want to do. But Takao knows what he wants to do at the age of 15. And we juxtapose that with Yukino, who doesn't have any idea what she's supposed to do now. She knew what she wanted to do, but she got thrown off track. She got discouraged because of the drama with the students, and she's afraid to go back to school because she doesn't know what will happen. And so she ends up quitting and moving away because that's how she feels like she can move forward. And that's her taking her own initiative and moving forward. But before this, she hardly seems to be mature in the least bit. She's eating beer and chocolate, and she's doing these terribly unhealthy things to herself, like not even showing up to work. If she had kept going like that, who knows where she would have ended up. She might have ended up having to move back in with a relative, or her life might have collapsed around her. And Takao, the most immature thing about Takao is that he is frustrated that he is a child. He hates the fact that he has to wait until he's a grown-up. He believes that being an adult it means that you figured everything out, and that there's a different world that exists for you, and that world is special and magical and unique, and being a student is boring and dull and terrible. And at the end of the film, Yukino kind of teaches him that you can't just skip all that. You need those life experiences. You need to grow up. Everybody needs to grow up in one way or another. Takao needs to grow up and learn that he is you can't just go from 15-year-old to fully fledged adult. There's a lot of stuff that has to happen in between that, no matter what your profession is or no matter how mature you are. We have the romance and the age comparison, and usually, and in this film as well, student-teacher romance is treated as forbidden. And that is because you're kind of, first, there's the age difference, the legality of the whole thing, and the fact that it's kind of like romance in the workplace. And a teacher is superior to a student, so you shouldn't be having that relationship. American television and American media, there's scandals anytime a teacher has a relationship with a kid. And in Japan, obviously, that would also probably be the case. And well, the thing with Yukino's design is it was done on purpose to kind of entrance Takao into wondering what the mysteries of Yukino were like, even though it turned out she wasn't that mysterious. She was designed to be like upper middle class, have nice clothes, very stylish, to try and appeal to like a 15-year-old boy. And Takao's design, the most major thing about his design is that he looks older than a 15-year-old. He's got broad shoulders. He has the determined look on his face. He's a little bit, tiny bit built. He's lean and a little bit built. And he just, you might not be able to tell at first glance that he is 15 years old. And the last thing I wanted to cover here, I think we've got about 5 minutes left, is loneliness. And this is not as prevalent, but there's still a little bit, it's still treated as a central theme. Shinkai stated that this movie was made for people who were lonely, and it wasn't made to tell people who were lonely that this is a bad thing. And it doesn't mean it just lonely as in you have no boyfriend or girlfriend. It's anybody who feels like they're lonely, no matter what their situation is. You can feel lonely in a crowded room full of people. It doesn't matter who's around you or what your relationships are. You can still feel prone to being lonely. So he made this movie with those kinds of people in mind. And he had this idea of koi, which is longing for someone in solitude, which Yukino and Takao both often do throughout the dry season. They both long for each other. And Shinkai says that being alone isn't a bad thing. He doesn't want you to think that at all. He wants to reinforce that sometimes you do need space to be alone. The whole point of this movie is the balance between relying on other people and walking on your own path. You need to find that balance. And so with this movie in mind, they were kind of being lonely together. They found each other, they each found a lonely individual, and they decided to try and help each other as much as they could. Takao tried to help Yukino walk on her own 2 feet, and Yukino tried to teach Takao that there was more to life than just being a mysterious adult. And Yukino, when she is alone, you see in the dry season when she's alone, the stress starts to get to her. She's not seeing Takao anymore, and just the little things build up. And eventually, in the morning, her makeup foundation cracks and breaks, and then she cries. And now, that's not something that would normally make you cry, but it's the little things built up over time, and that's the fact that she's kind of falling back into that depression, and she's becoming lonely again. And so what Shinkai...
We'll probably have to run through this a little quicker.
Yeah.
We're running out of time, sorry.
There's not too much more. Loneliness in general is... Shinkai was trying to say that everybody needs their own space. We also need each other's help, but we can't always rely on everybody else's help, because if we do, we can't move forward by ourselves. And if we're always lonely all the time, we're not going to make it through life. You always need somebody. Ever since you were born, you've needed somebody to help you move forward in life so you can live and become a better person. And both of those things need to be taken in moderation. And in conclusion, there are some additional slides after this, some pictures. But in conclusion, there's a lot of stuff packed into this 46 minutes. There's a lot of lessons, a lot of characterization, a lot of themes thrown at the viewer, and it might require 1 or 2 rewatches to fully appreciate, fully grasp what Shinkai is trying to get at with all these different films, or with all these different themes and all these different lessons. But I hope this panel has been able to try and teach you a little bit about what Shinkai was trying to tell his viewers, how he was doing it through his characters, and what techniques he employed to accomplish that. And one of Shinkai's biggest lessons is you cannot always have the happiest ending, but you can still have a happy ending. And this is a little bit extra that covers Shinkai's aesthetics.
I couldn't really leave off without having a little bit about the more technical aspects of Makoto Shinkai's design. But while we're looking through the pictures and you're looking at examples of some of his image creation, feel free to ask some questions. So the Shinkai aesthetic, these are some elements that he constantly includes in the images he creates, and he creates them digitally. They're not time? Okay, yeah. So I'm just going to run through this. He creates images by taking photographs and then digitally overlaying drawings. So there's actually nothing left of the original photograph. So you would ask, why don't you just use the photograph instead of drawing? It's because Makoto Shinkai manipulates these images to use the environment as a reflection of a character's emotional state. So that if they're sad, the image will look sad. The world will look different. And this is reflected in the temperature of the sea. So let's just take questions now.
Well, we don't have any time.
Oh, we don't have any time for questions.
Thank you for all for coming out.
Yeah.
I hope you enjoyed this panel. I've got some cards up here. I wrote about the Garden of Words in kind of a blog format, just an essay format, to prepare myself to run this panel. Alan's helped me out with some of the panel structure itself, and I hope you've enjoyed the panel. Thank you all for coming.